And we will now move to the member questions under the 5-minute rule, and I want to thank all of you for bearing with us as we voted. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. We heard in the ranking member's opening statement that there is no evidence of government censorship affecting small businesses. However, 3 of our witnesses' testimonies seem to negate that assertion. Additionally, we heard from Dr. Franks that this hearing is meant to harass research groups and universities. This is simply not true. We're asking for transparency to ensure that taxpayer dollars are not being weaponized to silence political opponents. Also, our committee has only sent letters to federal agencies, no universities or other private actors. This is a textbook congressional oversight. Now, though through our investigation we have seen hundreds of awards that have been given through the SBIR programs to companies who claim to be disinformation experts, to police the Internet, and interfere with Americans' right to free speech. One of these examples is NewsGuard. NewsGuard has multiple products, one of which uses politicized metrics to rate the media outlets based on their supposed credibility. And if NewsGuard claims an organization is not credible, their advertising revenue is severely affected. NewsGuard has reportedly rated around 10,000 media outlets, many of them small and medium businesses. So, Ms. Eunice, can you tell us more about how NewsGuard operates and how they impact the ability of businesses to earn revenue? And it's why it's a problem that the federal government is giving these kind of companies money.
So NewsGuard rates media companies based on their ostensible reliability, and that has the effect of driving advertiser revenue away from them if they're ranked unreliable. Now, I believe that GDI is even worse than NewsGuard, and their secret blacklist was actually revealed sometime before we started this litigation and was part of the reason we actually did. And their secret blacklist showed that all of the sites that they ranked reliable were liberal, including, websites such as the Huffington Post, which I would argue are not, don't really engage in the most journalistic practices of the highest integrity. And all of the ones that they deemed unreliable were conservative. So that really shows that this is viewpoint discrimination, not to mention the fact that the GEC shouldn't be funding any of this at all because their mandate is to deal with foreign so-called disinformation, and these are domestic news sites that they're ranking.
Okay, thank you. NewsGuard and companies like them don't just impact the businesses they rate. Small businesses that are not large enough to have an internal advertising department often partner with advertising companies to help get their products or services out to the public. Many of these advertising companies look at the ratings that NewsGuard gives media companies when deciding where to place a small business ad. So, Ms. Sheffield, if I'm a small business owner, which I actually am in Texas, and looking to place advertisements to online to a conservative audience, but the advertising partner I'm working with is partnered with a company like NewsGuard, am I going to have issues reaching out to the audiences I need to reach out to?
Well, so in the industry, there's a term called brand safe. And a lot of times, especially for a small startup or a medium-sized business, a lot of these big brands, like say a Nike or some of the bigger marquee brands, they aren't going to be familiar with smaller startups. And so they rely on some third parties to determine whether or not this organization or this media outlet is quote-unquote brand safe. And that brand safe designation can really make or break the future of a business. As I said earlier in my testimony, that 40% of small and medium business publishers say that digital ad sales drive over half of their overall revenue. So this could be the death knell if they're not considered brand safe.
Okay, Mr. Weingart, in the limited time that we have, over the course of our investigation, we found that so-called fact-checking organizations are being used to bolster traditional media outlets while labeling others, often small and medium-sized outlets, as untrustworthy if they question the accepted narratives. So this creates a conflict of interest for many news organizations, either get in line and stop asking tough questions or lose out on advertising revenue, potentially get out of the business. So based on the output of NewsGuards and similar companies' ratings, which narratives do you see being silenced, and do you think this is creating an environment where those in power are not being held accountable?
I think there's substantial evidence to suggest that views, for example, with respect to virtually every aspect of COVID-19, from origins to mitigation measures, would lead a site to get downgraded to the extent they took positions that were antithetical to those of public health authorities. We've also seen this as well with respect to the war in Ukraine. And I think what is so chilling about this ultimately is if this entire disinformation, counter-disinformation so-called ecosystem existed in and of itself without any sort of government backing, I think we'd probably still find it objectionable, but we'd say there's a First Amendment right to it. It's protected. The problem here is that government is conferring its blessing on this entire ecosystem, which clearly exists to chill speech officials don't like.
Thank you, and I now recognize the ranking member for 5 minutes of questions.